Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. CHP's March for Justice continues on its 23rd day. The march is expected to end in Maltepe on Sunday, where a public rally will be held.
Main opposition party CHP's March for Justice, which started immediately after the arrest of CHP lawmaker Enis Berberoğlu, has entered its third week. The 450-kilometer march from Ankara to Istanbul was commenced by CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu on June 15th, and the party subsequently initiated protests in all 81 provinces of Turkey. The march is expected to reach its final destination on Sunday and come to an end with a mass demonstration in the Maltepe district of Istanbul. CHP's Istanbul provincial head Cemal Canpolat said around 1.5 million people are expected to take part in the rally to be held in Maltepe. Canpolat said Kılıçdaroğlu is expected to enter Istanbul's official territory on the afternoon of July 7th and to walk another 3 kilometers to Maltepe, where rally will take place on the morning of July 9. We have organized around 3,000 vehicles to take participants to Maltepe. The vehicles will be ready in 958 neighborhoods in Istanbul. At the meeting, there will be around 1.5 million citizens, Canpolat said. Entry to the rally will start at 15 p.m. and there will be security points at 4 different locations, he added. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the Turkish police detained 6 suspected members of ISIS planning a bomb attack on the march, a provincial governor told Turkish media. Süleyman Kamçı, the governor of Kayseri, has said, "They were going to attack the march with a minibus. A big provocation has been thwarted." However, there was no immediate confirmation from national officials. 2 of the alleged bombers were detained in Kocaeli, while 4 others were detained in Kayseri, according to Daily Hürriyet. The governor also said the suspects had put flags from the ruling Justice and Development Party in the minibus, possibly in an attempt to give the impression that the government was somehow involved. CHP spokesman Bülent Tezcan played down the detentions, saying they were part of routine work by the security forces. "We are working to let the march take place in a safe environment despite all kinds of attempted provocations," Tezcan said.
Our guest via Skype tonight is Selin Sayek Böke, who is a member of the Turkish Parliament with the Republican People's Party, CHP. Good evening, Mrs. Böke. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure.
So, Mrs. Böke, you were with the March for Justice crowd today in Tuzla near Istanbul. Can you start by telling us how today went and how the general atmosphere is as the march nears its end?
Indeed, each day is better than the previous day. And the reason that this optimism is escalating is because each individual step that's taken creates a tenfold effect among the public, the crowd that's in there. Both the quantity of people who are actually participating in the march and also the optimism that's growing within the march is indeed amazing, and it's going hand in hand. I think this is proof that people were quite hungry to find new outlets for political voices to be raised. So this has become a very inclusive, very democratic, very peaceful way of indeed building up a new political process in Turkey. So today was better than yesterday, which I think is a great optimism and hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today because of this march.
Mm-hmm. Your party's chairman, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, has called for all citizens demanding justice to attend Sunday's public rally that is scheduled to be held in Maltepe. Can you explain what the CHP is hoping to get out of this rally?
So the way the rally started was actually sparked maybe by the jailing of one of our own MPs. But we should underline that there has been a huge buildup of injustices in Turkey, especially over the past couple of years, but maybe more so in the past year through the state of emergency decrees. In a normal society of democracy, you would have people being able to contribute to politics and be a part of politics and daily life in 2 different ways. One is through their MPs. right? By electing an MP to represent them in the parliament, they give the right to these people to indeed make laws that would allow the larger public to feel included into this process through a participatory process. Unfortunately, the parliament in Turkey has been inoperational in making this an inclusive process. It's what the ruling party decides, and it's what the ruling party says, and maybe even further, it's an individual who decides and actually does the lawmaking. And the second channel is the civil society. In a normal democracy, each one of us would be able to raise our concerns, our demands, and participate through civil society in political processes. But especially in the past year, whoever opposes the ruling party, whoever has a different idea in how things should be done, and whoever raises their voice through such civil society engagement has either been jailed, has been purged, has lost their hopes for the future, and silenced, and this includes large groups of the society. So this very sense of injustice that's being built up has to be resolved through a participatory political process. So I think this march, which is bringing people together around the very basic fundamental concept of justice that would allow a state to be operational, a society to be able to work together and live together, is an important issue that has built a new political process, but also the process of marching has built up a true democratic sense, a true grassroots movement that I think will eventually push political parties as well. So the objective was to figure out, in a very abnormal political arena in Turkey, new ways of political channels. The normal channels are clogged up, both through representation and civil society engagement. So we have to find new channels of allowing participation, engagement, and a political process that would also maybe push the parties to match into this new world. So if you ask me, we've already achieved that in the march. So this march has been a great step in the right direction. We now have to do two things. One, we have to continue this sentiment. Two, we have to capitalize as political parties on this beyond political parties grassroots movement that has been building.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Böke, as you also know, earlier in the week, the Istanbul police detained 6 suspected members of the Islamic State who were allegedly preparing for an attack on this march. How do you perceive this threat, and does this worry you?
If threats worried us, I don't think 10,000s of people in such heat, under such oppression, would indeed be out on the streets. Hope can only come out if you have the courage to do so. And I think we are seeing great proof that courage is contagious. This is why an individual step taken by anybody has tenfold effect among the crowd. Because if you show the courage to come out and be together, this gives another person who was hesitant maybe to raise their voice or concerned about such attacks to realize that if we're together, if we come together, and if we show that we actually are requesting a new political process that's inclusive, then such threats can actually be avoided easily. So I think here the key sentiment is definitely hope, and is one that has overcome much of the threats, including such terrorist activity threats, and also oppression from the state itself. And this sentiment has been building up. Even though it seems to be something new, I must say that the run-up to the referendum on the 16th of April indeed was the main build-up of this sentiment. Despite oppression, despite a huge state that was using any tools to force the society towards a constitutional change, millions in Turkey actually said, I am willing to take all risks, because I realize that if I don't do so, we don't have a future where we'll be in peace, where we will have unity as a country, and where we actually have a true democracy.
Mm-hmm. The March for Justice echoed widely in the international media, and CHP's leader, Kılıçdaroğlu, published an article on the New York Times titled "A Long March for Justice in Turkey," giving a list of demands of this march. And you also gave an interview to BBC's Mark Lowen this week. So can you tell us how the foreign media and news outlets have approached this march?
I have been speaking quite some English this week, I must say, and I think here we have to put the following forth. The demands that we're raising as the part of the Turkish society are indeed universal values demanded for the Turkish society. The 16th of April referendum brought together millions, and we know it's way beyond 50% of the voters, to actually request democracy for the country. And this time, around this march, millions are coming together around the fundamental value of justice. So this is to say, these universal values of democracy, universal values of justice, clearly go way beyond the borders of Turkey. We as Turkish citizens are putting up a fight and a struggle to ensure that this happens in Turkey, but it's only natural that this finds voice abroad, and we hope it finds further voice and support for those of us throughout the world who care for a true democracy for themselves and for everybody else. So we're happy to see the interest in the support for such universal values.
Mm-hmm. Selin Sayek Böke, thank you very much for sparing us your time tonight and for being with us.
Great pleasure. Best regard.
We'll continue with our next news video. Turkish journalist Mirgün Cabas interviewed CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu for Medyascope this week.
I marched for approximately 21 kilometers on the first day. Later on, people joined me on the way, and we came across various protests and applauses. There were many people joining us and showing their support. From day 1 to day 19, the March for Justice has echoed not only in the Turkish media, but also in the international media, and I'm very pleased about this. There were critics from the government side. They said, "Why are you marching?" Well, why not? They criticized us by asking, "Why are you marching?" They could have asked, "There is already justice in the country," but they don't say that because they also know for a fact that there is no justice in this country. We respond to such criticisms from time to time, but at the end of the day, I am very happy about the popular support which has united people around the idea of justice. There are people from all strata, including the Welfare Party, the Justice and Development Party, the Felicity Party and the Nationalists. We really have the support of everyone. When the question about party identities came up, we said this: if anyone from a specific political party is going to participate in this march, we don't want them to join with their corporate or political identity. I am in this march as the chairman of the CHP, but I carry this banner only as Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu and don't allow myself to be announced by anyone as the chairman of the CHP. We haven't carried CHP flags or banners throughout the way. We don't find it appropriate to participate with a corporate identity. We will hold a mass demonstration in Maltepe and everybody is invited. Not people from Party A or Party B, but all ordinary citizens are invited. If people think that there is no justice in the country, if there are people who think that there is an atmosphere of fear, and if people can no longer state their opinions freely, or if there are people who think if I somehow end up in the courtroom, the justice system will make me suffer, they should attend this demonstration. The statements of the government and Erdogan criminalized this march. Therefore, it made it easier for some people to have a tougher attitude against us. Can we be attacked by some people? Maybe. Can there be any provocations against us? Maybe. We are very careful about these issues. All deputies and citizens said, you may be protested, offended, people can throw stones at you, and other unpleasant things may happen as well, but you should never ever respond. If you really must respond, just chant right, law and justice. It turned out that, indeed, people have thrown stones at us. One of us was even hurt in the head, but we didn't respond. We were offended. We didn't respond, but only applauded, because we want justice. We want to live in peace in this country, and we want this notion to be the skeleton of our understanding of politics.
Kimlikle kimsenin katılmasını istemiyoruz.
The European Parliament has called for Turkey's EU accession talks to be suspended if the constitutional changes endorsed in the April 16th referendum are put into effect.
The European Parliament called on Thursday for Turkey's European Union accession talks to be suspended without delay if Ankara goes ahead with the constitutional changes endorsed in the April 16 referendum, in a vote which Turkey dismissed as flawed and wrong. The vote in the Parliament on the proposal, which was prepared by Katipri, the European Parliament's lead negotiator on Turkey, passed by a wide margin with support from the biggest party groups. The Parliament voted in favor of the 2016 Commission report on Turkey recommending the suspension of accession talks, with 477 voting in favor and 64 voting against. The report condemned what it called disproportionate repressive measures taken by the Turkish government, especially after the failed coup attempt last summer, and alleged that the government's actions are further diverting Turkey from its European path. The report also calls on European Union institutions to suspend pre-accession funds if the negotiations are suspended. It's a non-binding vote in terms of European Union decision-making. Responding to the European Union Parliament's decision, Turkey's European Union Affairs Minister Ömer Çelik announced that Ankara does not accept the European Union Parliament report. We will continue to work closely with European Union institutions, which strengthens our dialogue and cooperation in other areas, he added. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hüseyin Müftüoğlu said the decision was based on false claims and allegations and undermined the European Parliament's reputation. It's not a very important decision from our perspective. It's also not something that was unknown. Similar decisions were made in previous months. This decision is invalid and void for us, Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım told reporters on Thursday.
Ömer Taşpınar from the Brookings Institute commented on the Qatar crisis for Medyascope's weekly Turkish language news show Transatlantic.
Turkey is now in a very difficult position. I think Turkey handled this crisis very left-handedly, because on one hand it tries to portray itself as impartial, but on the other hand it doesn't want to sever its economic ties and dialogue with Saudi Arabia. But saying I don't take sides and then sending troops to Qatar, taking the military-based issue to the parliament so hastily, putting itself under the spotlight of this crisis, and then saying I'm not a part to this dispute and I even want to be a mediator, is weakening Turkey's position a lot. If you are not a party, then you won't send troops, or you will share certain guarantees with Qatar behind closed doors. If you openly take the issue to the parliament and say I'm sending troops, you do become a party to this dispute. And it's obscure for what reason Turkey has become a party. Is it because it wants to pursue a principled foreign policy, or is it because of financial relations? Of course, Erdogan's answer will be principled foreign policy. It could also be that he is following a certain ideological rhetoric through the Muslim Brotherhood. But everybody knows that economic and financial relations with Qatar are much more important for Turkey than those with Saudi Arabia. It could also be because of a certain emotional connection with the Muslim Brotherhood. But all in all, Turkey is in a very difficult position right now. Turkey has shown that it's, in fact, not a wise player in the Middle East, and that it has failed to fully comprehend the region's dynamic. Turkey has further shown that its behavior with the Arab League and the Gulf has been amateurish, and in my opinion, Turkey is no longer an actor here. Erdogan may have realized during his talk with Trump that Turkey is no longer an actor because Trump does not take Turkey very seriously. According to what I heard, Erdogan actually expressed his disappointment during his talk with Trump and said, all of this happened after your visit to the Middle East. But we thought your visit would reunify the region and produce better dialogue. Trump said nothing in response to this and ignored Turkey's efforts, which means that Turkey is not an actor. From what I heard, Turkey has established a good relationship with France under President Macron. France seems to be a more active party here. There is an interesting dialogue between Erdogan and Macron. They hold important telephone calls. I can't tell if this leads to anything, but it seems that countries like France Kuwait, and the United States may start playing a much more active role in the region. Of course, Qatar wants the base to be shut down. This is hard to digest for Turkey. On one hand, it claims to be impartial, but on the other hand, it has to withdraw its troops. Turkey can withdraw its troops only if Qatar fully surrenders and tells Turkey to withdraw them. Otherwise, this is very hard to come to terms with for a leader like Erdogan, who is, in a way, someone who pursues a macro-foreign policy and also cares about his image at home.
O zaman da dünya tabii büyük bir
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan traveled to Germany on Thursday to attend the G20 summit in Hamburg, where he met German Chancellor Angela Merkel and US President Donald Trump.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan arrived in Germany on Thursday evening to attend the summit in Hamburg amid tensions between the two countries. The two leaders shook hands ahead of the meeting and appeared before the press. During the one-hour meeting, Deputy Prime Minister Mehmet Şimşek, EU Minister Ömer Çelik, Energy Minister Berat Albayrak, and Presidential Spokesperson Ibrahim Kalın accompanied the President. No press conference was organized after the meeting. Ties between Turkey and Germany have once again become tensed ahead of Erdogan's visit to the country for the G20 summit. Although Erdogan's address to the Turkish community in Germany during his visit is not on his official schedule yet, Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel's statement that such a gathering would not be a good idea raised tension between the two countries. Erdogan told the Zeit weekly that Germany was committing suicide by not letting him speak to Turks in the country, and it must correct this mistake. However, he also said Germany and Turkey needed each other, and on a personal level, he has no problem with Merkel. President Erdogan and Minister of Foreign Affairs Mevlut Çavuşoğlu met US President Donald Trump after the first session of the G20 summit. Erdogan is also scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the summit.
A group of human rights activists were detained during a conference in the island of Büyükada on Wednesday.
Police detained 10 human rights activists on Thursday, including the Turkey head of Amnesty International, İtıklanarak, during a meeting on an island of Istanbul. The activists had gathered at a hotel on Büyükada, one of the Princess Islands in the Marmara Sea, where they were organizing a digital security and information management workshop, according to Amnesty International. It was still not clear why the activists were being held. Some sources admit that activists have been detained on suspicion of membership of a terrorist organization. The group of people who were arrested included 8 human rights activists, 2 instructors from Germany and Sweden, respectively, and the hotel owner. Amnesty's Turkey researcher Andrew Gardner said the detentions seem very arbitrary. They were attending a routine educational workshop, but there was a speculative notice as if they were holding a secret meeting. This is a grotesque abuse of power and highlights the precarious situation facing human rights activists in the country, said Amnesty International Secretary General Salih Shetty. Turkish officials stated that all actions are carried out within the framework of the law.
Omar Katkoy from the Economic Policy Research Foundation of Turkey commented on the impact of Syrians on the Turkish labor market for Medyascope today.
The 10% quota is actually flexible, and it is bendable when the demand for especially the local employees, here I'm talking about Turks specifically, exceeds the supply of available workers actually. That's when the 10% quota can be bended and more Syrians can be employed. This is actually a reality in certain provinces with certain Syrian entrepreneurs or businessmen who moved their web of relations and reestablished their businesses again here in Turkey. So the 10% quota is not as rigid as it sounds. However, when the dynamics exist to bend that rule, the local authorities are very cooperative to do so. But let me tell you this one thing as well. Today in Turkey, we have 1.4 million businesses registered at the Union Chambers of Commerce and Commodity Exchanges. So, unfortunately, we do not have an effective mechanism to control and do regular checkups on the employment dynamics with all of these 1.4 million businesses. Consequently, this means that Syrians become the weaker link in employment because actually two very clear reasons. One, the poor command of the Turkish language, and the second one is the unaccredited professional and educational skills they have. So these factors combined together leave Syrians to be exploited by the private sector or the employers, basically. And we also should know that considering the size of the businesses, as I mentioned before, illegal employment is not something only related to Syrians. Also, locals suffer from such a thing. But I want to emphasize specifically on the lack of mechanisms to monitor the legality and illegality of employing Syrians and locals in any workshop or any workplace.
Our friend Şükran Şençekiçer interviewed Professor Kenneth Westphal from Boğaziçi University at the Philosophy in Assos conference in Çanakkale this week.
Hi, today we are in Assos. We are here to attend the conference Philosophy in Assos. We talked to Professor Kenneth Westphal from Boğaziçi University. Professor Westphal is one of the speakers of the conference, and he's a scholar of the German philosopher Immanuel Kant.
My name's Ken Westphal, and I teach at Boğaziçi University now. I've just finished my third year teaching here, and I have really quite wide-ranging interests in philosophy. Obviously, I'm very interested in Kant's philosophy, which was the topic for this year's conference, but also in Hegel, and both in epistemology, history, and philosophy of science, but also in moral philosophy concerning both ethics and justice. My presentation here was on issues regarding freedom of action and responsibility for action. And I have always tried to integrate historical and systematic philosophy and what is called analytical and what I would rather call hermeneutical philosophy rather than continental philosophy, which doesn't really work as a designation. And I've always found it extremely stimulating philosophically to interact with people in different areas, working on different issues, working on the same issues I am, but always with different interests, different foci, and the convergence, and sometimes the dissonance between these different approaches has always been very instructive.
Istanbul's iconic Beyoğlu Cinema, which had announced its closure earlier in the month, will stay in business under a new management.
The Beyoğlu Movie Theatre, which has been trying to survive after several other movie theatres such as Alcazar, Rüya, Cinepop and Emek were closed down, has been around since 1989. It's not only an independent business, it's also renowned as one of the city's phenomenal movie theatres which exclusively shows indie movies. In the beginning of June, the movie theatre administration announced that they would be shut down in the end of the month. Two screenwriters in an attempt to save it from bankruptcy. The two screenwriters, Cem Altınsaray and Utku Ögetürk, introduced a Beyoğlu Cinema loyalty card scheme on Monday in order to collect the necessary finances as soon as possible to pay off the theater's debt. Cinema lovers from all across the country have gathered through social media to show solidarity and support for Cem Altınsaray's initiative.
Now let's have a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
24th Istanbul Jazz Festival kicked off on Tuesday and continues at full steam. Tomorrow night will be a homage to the cult guitarist and composer of flamenco, Paco de Lucia, by iconic musicians like Jorge Pardo, Carles Benavent, Jose Maria Bandera, Nino Josele and Piranha, with whom the artist had collaborated in different stages of his career. Contributors from Turkey will include Levent Yüksel, whose Tuana, a famous remake of Paco de Lucia's Palenque, earned his stardom in the heydays of Turkish pop. Taksim Trio is one of the most spectacular bands of world music in recent years, which will be on stage to demonstrate the unusual harmony of clarinet, baglama, kanun and flamenco. Cenk Erdoğan, a rare maestro of fretless guitar in Turkey and composer of award-winning film scores, is also among the guests of this matchless night.
Teach me to love, know me more. Teach me.
Candice Springs will be on the stage of Sultan Park on a warm Sunday summer night, with her mesmerizing vocals and amusing songs that bring soul, jazz and pop together. The young musician will be followed on stage by the new project of the American jazz bassist Christian McBride, New John Quartet, with their modern jazz explorations. Considered among the most productive of his generation of jazz musicians, with over 300 records. McBride has proved his virtuosity with 5 Grammy Awards he had received. The 6th Mural Istanbul Street Art Festival kicked off on Tuesday. Organized through the support of the Kadıköy municipality, Mural Istanbul is one of the city's most prominent street art festivals, bringing in amazing street artists from abroad to paint building-sized murals. The Yeldirmeni neighborhood has been turned into an open-air museum since the festival's inception in 2012. Participating artists are Turkish collective The Writer Material, Spanish Treze, Mr. Hure, Ukrainian Alex Maxiov, Austrian Finton Maggie.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.